G'day cobbers, welcome back to the bush. In this episode of Lock Carbs for All Driving, we're going to sort out once and for all one of those hotly contested campfire discussions going. That's right, whether you should be drawing out the ice water from your Esky in order to keep your beverages cold. Now, we've probed these things within 6 inches of their life. Actually, they think they've been involved in an alien induction. So, let's get into the testing. So we've got two identical Eskys. One will be automatically draining and the other one will retain the water. Now this is the draining one and I'll show you the setup. So we've got a temperature probe in the top there. We've got a couple of holes that I've poked in down the bottom there. And I'll put some cups and I've celastic them onto the bottom so it raises it above my catch tray. That was an interesting conversation. Swimbo yells out from the lounge room, "What are you doing in there, Simon?" I said, "Well, I'm celasticing some cups onto the bottom of an Esky." She went, "What?" I said, "You knew what you were getting into 25 years ago." Anyway, I digress. So that's the setup we have. It automatically drains into the drain here and hopefully doesn't flood out the healing bench. Now the other one here, same sort of setup as the other one, except there's no holes in the bottom. Rightio, so let's load them up and start the testing. So we're all set up, let's get on with the testing. So I'm going to put 1 scoop of ice in the bottom of each Esky. And then grab our test cans, pop them in, and we'll top it up right to the top with ice. So we've got about an even amount of ice in each Esky. And I want to completely cover the tops. It's never very good at ball sports at school either. Hand-eye coordination, just not there. Maybe just a touch more. Oh yeah. So we've got about an even amount of ice in each Esky. Maybe a couple more in this one, I think. There we go, that looks better. So what I'm going to do now is put the lid on, close him up, and those Coke cans had a thermocouple probe on each of those as well. That squashed down a bit. That's all right. It's still above the drink line. Now, we're at 48 hours, and we'll leave it for 48 hours and see how we go. We'll see you then.
A few moments later.
Okay, we're back after 48 hours. So, let's have a look at what we've got left. So I'll stop the recording on the data logger. Now, what I'll do is I'll actually take the camera off and we'll have a look in the Esky itself. Excuse the motion sickness. Rightio, so this one was just ice. Not draining at all, as we can see. That's now water in there. Completely defrosted after 48 hours. And in the second Esky that was draining, well, that one's empty. So, let's check the data log and see where we got to. Rightio, ladies and gents, here we are. The final results are in. So, we've got the temperature in degrees Celsius up and down here, and along this axis here, we have 0 to 48 hours. Now, the blue line here, that's the lid with the drain, and the grey line here is the lid without the drain. The orange line heading up here is the can temperature with the drain, and the yellow line here, that's the can temperature without the drain. So these are primarily the ones we're interested in. So line ball to almost a 24-hour mark, and then it started deviating up here. Now this is the temperature of the cans with the drain. So this is raising in temperature here, whilst the cans without the drain, the ones swimming in the melted water, is retaining its temperature. It's going up a little bit, but not a lot. And we get almost the same temperature as the start for an additional over 12 hours, maybe 13 or 14 hours in comparison when we're draining the water out. So you definitely don't want to drain your water. Now that's assuming you got food or drinks in there that are waterproof. I mean, cryovac meat will be fine. However, if you put an open packet of bacon in there, not so good. Anyway, so those are results. Now, why are those our results? We'll get into that now. So about 24 hours into the testing, I took a photograph with a FLIR camera, and these are the results. So on the left-hand side, we can see we've got the draining Esky, and on the right-hand side, we've got the non-draining Esky. Now, the temperature between the two, it's a little bit higher on the draining side than the non-draining side, a bit over 1 degree Celsius. It also tells me we have more thermal mass, more cold thermal mass of water and ice slurry in the non-draining Esky, which you'd expect because it's retaining the water. We can also see that we're leaking a little bit of cold out of the crevices here. And you can see where all the cold mass has gone from our draining Esky. And that's into my catch tray, which is keeping my healing bench nice and dry. Anyway, on with the next bit. Now, the way an Esky works is it's trying to prevent what's called thermal equilibrium, and it sounds more complicated than it actually is. All it means is, let's say we have an internal temperature of 1 degree Celsius with our drinks and our ice and water, and on the outside we got an ambient temperature of 25 degrees Celsius. We have a layer of insulation that's retaining our ice in there, and that's trying to stop the two temperatures from becoming even, and that's what thermal equilibrium is. When you have two bodies that are near or touching each other, they're going to try and become the same temperature. And the insulation, because it's a bad thermal conductor or reasonably bad thermal conductor, it prolongs the amount of time that it takes to reach thermal equilibrium. And the longer it takes, the longer you get to keep your drinks cold. So the next concept that's going to be beneficial for you to understand is what's called specific heat capacity. Now, it sounds more complicated than it actually is. Now, it's measured in joules per kilogram per degree Celsius, but that really doesn't matter for our purposes. All it is the amount of energy that is applied or removed to change 1 kilogram of a substance 1 degree Celsius. So that could be the amount of energy required to change water from 20 degrees Celsius to 21 degrees Celsius, or that same amount of water from 21 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius. Now, air, for comparison purposes, is 993, and water is 4,200. So its specific heat capacity of water is actually 4.23 times the heat capacity of air. But don't forget, that's measured in kilograms, and the density of water and air are two completely different things. Let's have a look at that. Now, what's more important than specific heat capacity is volumetric heat capacity for our purposes. Now, if you take into consideration 1 cubic metre, so that's a space 1 metre by 1 metre by 1 metre of air, it only weighs 1.29 kilograms. But that same space of water weighs 1,000 kilograms. So air is 775 times less dense than water. It's considerably lighter, considerably less dense. So if we times our 775 times that by our specific heat capacity, that gives us an enormous figure of 3,278. So water has a volumetric heat capacity 3,278 times that of water. Why does that matter to us? Because when you're draining out that water with a 3,278 time volumetric heat capacity over the air that's replacing it, you're losing that cooling efficiency. Not only that, when you're draining that out, the air has to come from somewhere. It's not multiplying inside of the Esky, it usually has to come from the ambient air. So if you're in 35 degrees Celsius ambient, you're sucking in that ambient air at 35 degrees, which has to use some energy from somewhere to get down to temperature, and it's coming from your eyes. That's why we don't drain the water from the Esky if we can avoid it. You want to keep your beverages cool, you want to keep your cryovac mates cool, don't drain the water from your Esky. And if you can keep your other things that might get a bit damaged from being wet above the level of the water and ice in the Esky, you're much better off doing that. If you can put some crates in the top, some baskets in and keep your stuff dry, you're much better doing that. Anyway, so that's why you don't drain the water from your Esky. Because, well, science. So now if you like this video, don't forget to give it the old thumbs up, and if you didn't, by all means, give it a thumbs down. Not thrice, but twice. Thanks guys, we'll see you in the next one. So if you've enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell icon. It's really important to us and you won't miss out on our future content. Now if you want to support the channel, by all means, consider becoming a patron on Patreon and you get things like early access to our videos on YouTube. Either way, we hope to see you out on the tracks.